Welcome back, Fluffle fam! First of all, thank you again so much for joining us in our little Bun Mom Life Cafe and for spending time with us. We love your company and really appreciate your time more than you know. Today, we're talking about a terrifying incident that happened to us about a little over a month ago. Kumo choking. Oh, goodness. It was one of the scariest moments in our lives. So buckle your seatbelts because we're about to go for an intense ride. It was a usual Monday evening. Bundad had gone out to play soccer and returned after his game. He had his shower, he cleaned up, and he was sitting with the Bun Buns in my studio as per usual, giving them the last of their portion of pellets and some pets before heading off to bed. I was already in bed. And then suddenly, I hear Bundad's urgent, panicked voice. "Come here, hurry!" My heart sank to the bottom of my stomach as I leapt out of bed and dashed through the hallway into my studio space. And Bundad said, "Something's happening to Kumo. I think he's choking." I immediately searched the room for Kumo and found that he had run to the far end, against the wall under the window, and he was making these awful, coughing, gurgling, wet, choking sounds, and his mouth and nose were covered in this wet, brown, greenish-colored goop. I dropped to my knees in front of him, and he continued to cough. He was pawing at his nose and mouth area, and he was clearly in discomfort. He was also panicking, which was awful because when I tried to reach for him, he would run away. In that moment, I remembered the videos that someone had made teaching us how to do the bunny heimlich maneuver whenever your bunny's choking. And although I already had an idea and sense of how to do it, Bundad and I still pulled up the video so that we could reference it and make sure we knew what we were doing before we started anything. I really actually wasn't even sure if we needed to do the bunny heimlich in that moment, but we didn't want to risk waiting too long to be sure. I still remember my hands were trembling, my whole body was shaking, and my breaths were coming out in these quick, short pants. And, strangely, at the same time, I had this hyper-focus in my head. My mind was much calmer than what I would have imagined, especially since my physical body was shaking. And I remember all I could think of was, what do we need to do right now? So I quickly reviewed that video of the lady performing the bunny heimlich on a little stuffy toy. And then despite feeling absolutely terrified and totally not qualified or prepared, I went to pick up Kumo. And it was extremely difficult because he was really panicking. He was panicking from the choking, and then suddenly he's also being picked up, so he was squirming like crazy. He jumped out of my arms the first couple of times. I really wasn't sure I could do it. I did not feel all that confident, but there was no other option. I had to. Finally, I managed to get him sprawled on my left forearm with his head in my left hand, and I gently but firmly placed my other arm on top of him with my right hand on top of his head, supporting his neck. And then I did that first swing up and then down. I managed to get in one other swing before Kumo was able to escape and jump out of my arms. We called the emergency hospital immediately and let them know that we were coming in right away. But in the back of our heads, we knew the drive would still take 20 minutes. If Kumo was choking and couldn't breathe, 20 minutes was too long. 1 minute would be too long. As I wrapped up the call with the hospital receptionist, Bundad had already been sprinting out of the studio and down the stairs to grab their carrier. We kept the studio room door shut so that both Rue and Kumo would stay inside, making it easier to gather them both to leave. While Bundad was running downstairs and getting dressed as quickly as he could, I kept watching Kumo. And he was still in shock, but there was no more of that gurgling or coughing. And I carefully looked at the skin around his mouth and nose, noticing that they were still pink in color and not turning blue or purple. So it seemed like whatever was lodged had come out, and I had guessed that I didn't need to continue the bunny heimlich, and we were on our way to take him to the vets to make sure everything was for sure okay. When Bundad came up with the carrier, we put both bunnies inside, and as Bundad was quickly running down the stairs as carefully as he could with them in the carrier, I threw on a sweater and some pants over my pajamas at lightning speed, the quickest I've ever put clothes on, I'm sure. Then I ran down those stairs, grabbed my purse, and ran out the door. During the car ride, I kept the top of the carrier opened so I could monitor Kumo. Rue was there with him too, as I mentioned, and I turned the back seat light on so I could make sure Kumo was breathing properly throughout the drive. It was very dark outside since it was the middle of the night. When the car hit a bump or made a sharp turn, because Bundad was definitely driving as fast as he could, Kumo would actually lift his head up as though to look around and scope. And this is what he normally would do. And so I knew that he was relatively okay. As soon as we arrived at the emergency hospital, the bunnies were whisked off to the back immediately for a checkup. As we waited, Bundad and I started going over what had happened. The bunnies get the final remainder of their pellets for the day at night with Bundad, and there's usually just a little bit left. And Kumo gets super duper excited about pellets. He loves them so much, and the way he likes to eat them is to gobble them all up really, really quickly. You may remember from our previous episode about dental procedures that when we first adopted Kumo, he came from a predominant pellet diet, so he did not enjoy eating hay at all. So with a lot of patience and work, we had to wean Kumo off of mainly eating pellets to eating hay. And thankfully, now he loves hay and he eats a ton of it. But pellets have become like a mega treat for him. And so he gets so excited whenever he sees pellets. And since he inhales them so quickly, we've always given pellets to Kumo in smaller amounts. And at first, it was because he would gobble all of his up and then go over and steal all of Rue's. That's what usually happens if we don't slow him down. He just shovels as many pellets as he can into his mouth, as much as he can fit, like a chipmunk, and then he'll start to chew them. So that evening of this incident, Bundad had a few pellets in one spot for Kumo to eat, and then he had placed a few pellets in another spot. This was his way to slow Kumo down. But it just happened that it was the perfect storm that night in that Kumo was extra excited and eager. He gobbled up all the pellets in one spot first, and before he chewed through and swallowed, he was racing to the other spot for the other pellets. And in that moment, some of those pellets that he was holding in his mouth went down his breathing tube, his trachea, and so he started to choke. Bundad also mentioned he was touching the rug and noticed a wet goop of a couple of pellets that were partially broken down inside of it. That's when he heard Kumo's coughing sounds from where Kumo had run off to. Bunnies like to hide when they're not feeling well, and so Kumo had run off to another spot to be away from Bundad and Rue. In that spot, later on, that's where I found another glop of soggy, disintegrated pellets. Looking back and reviewing everything in our heads as best as we could, we guessed that Kumo actually managed to dislodge the pellets himself before I even did the bunny heimlich. So shortly after Kumo was brought to the back to get checked out, the emergency vet came out to speak with us. And she told us she checked his throat, his lungs, and everything was all right. He was breathing normally and his vitals were stable. We were, of course, extremely relieved. They brought the bunnies out in their carrier and we took them home. This was now around 1 a.m. in the morning. As soon as we put the carrier on the ground at home and unzipped the top, they both jumped out of it by themselves. We brought up some pieces of cilantro, and Kumo nibbled on them right away. He was still a little bit in shock, so he stayed sitting in a little corner for a bit. Definitely not his usual hyper, hopping everywhere self. We gave him some pets, and he was able to relax. Then he jumped into the litter box and he took a nap there. After a little while longer, he started nibbling on his hay, which gave us even more relief and made us really happy. Needless to say, we did not sleep well at all that night since we kept waking up to check on him. Bundad had to go into office the next day, so he had to sleep, but he still only got in a couple of hours. The next morning, Kumo was back to his usual self for breakfast. And then with pellets in the stacking cups, he went at them with his usual excitement and fervor, not traumatized at all by his choking incident, unlike his bun parents. Now, to be even safer, we feed him pellets even slower than before. We now pretty much hand feed the pellets to him one at a time. We give him one, we tell him, chew first, Kumo, and then we give him the next. With the stacking cups, those are great because those are enough to slow him down, and he's not running around with pellets in his mouth when he's distracted by unstacking the cups, so we actually don't have to worry as much about him choking when he's eating pellets at that time. Bunnies choking on pellets is actually a very common occurrence. I've read sometimes the pellets could be too small, sometimes the pellets can be too big. Honestly, I think for Kumo's case, it was the very first time it has happened in the 1.5 years or more that he's been with us. So we know it was a very scary, but also one-off scenario. I don't think there's anything wrong with the size of the pellets that we're giving him. But there are bunnies out there who frequently choke on their pellets, in which case I've read that their bun parents end up changing the type of pellets they eat, or they soak the pellets first before feeding them to their bunnies. Oh, the roller coaster ride, that is the bun mom life. We are so grateful that Kumo is fine and doing well after that incident, and extremely grateful to the lady who put out the video demonstrating the bunny heimlich, which we will also try to share in our stories. I think every bunny parent should familiarize themselves with it and have it saved somewhere for quick access when needed. It's even good just to watch it and review it every once in a while. You just never know. We sincerely hope none of you ever has to use it, and we hope we never have to use it again, but better to be equipped with the maneuver just in case. It can save your bunny's life. And that's all for today. That's our wild story of Kumo's choking incident. We hope this episode was helpful in some way. If you've ever experienced your bunny choking and have any tips you'd like to share, we'd really appreciate it, as I'm sure the rest of the bunny community would also really appreciate it. So please do send us a message, an email, however you'd like to share that info with us. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are. Remember, you are loved and cherished always. Our Bun Buns send you lots of boops. Bye!